It's about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hi, I am Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is to continue working in JSJSFX, this approach that is kind of weird that I'm coming up with to write real-time audio effects for Reaper. And in case you're new here, this is what we have been doing for the past 2 days, exploring the trade-offs in terms of performance and expressiveness. And Benjamin is here. Hello, great to have you here. In case you didn't notice, the title of the stream changed. I was going to stream with Arya and we were going to talk about our favorite Reaper features and scripts, but he didn't show up. So Arya, if you are out there, tell us if you are okay. I haven't heard from you in a while. But never mind that, we are going to write some more code today. So Benjamin, in case you are here for that other thing that I was going to do, we'll do it some other day. Today, we are writing some more code. So the idea is that JSFX is this language that allows you to write real-time audio effects for Reaper. And it has some limitations in terms of abstractions, what you can do with functions. For instance, you cannot have recursive functions and objects cannot be passed as arguments to functions and that sort of thing. It's a limited language by design because you want to do real-time audio processing. You need to be fast. And cutting back on some features makes you go faster, which is a good thing. But there are some abstractions that we would like to have and that we don't have in JSFX. So I'm coming up with this approach that I'm calling JSJSFX, which is a JavaScript program that generates JSFX. So that's what this is all about. In the end of the day, JSFX is just a text file, so I'm using JavaScript to generate that text file. And we have been exploring with this with a bunch of filters, a bunch of low-pass filters, and we also wrote a program yesterday that was kind of funny. It was a program that blew Reaper up because it was so long. It was 8 million lines of code in that program. And all of that is fine and good. We explored the trade-offs, and it seems like, for the most part, it is faster to use JSFX instead of using JSFX. So when doing JSFX, we don't use functions, for instance. We just unroll the function body, we inline the function body where the function would have been used. And that is generally slightly faster. This stress test that used to be 25% CPU when it was using the JSFX abstraction, when I started using JSJSFX abstraction, so I inlined functions, I unrolled loops, I didn't use memory, all of that stuff, it went down from 25% to 20%. So it is slightly faster. Now, it's not a huge difference. So I guess what I want to explore today is what can I do in terms of abstractions that will clean up the code? Because the code that we have been writing so far is okay, but it's not awesome. Let me show you an example. This is the kind of code that we have to write in JSFX to declare data structures and whatnot. And it is repetitive, and I think that there is something There are some things that I can do to make this slightly better. It's not awesome. Can we write code that looks better using JSJSFX approach? That's the question that we are going to explore. And Bo is here. Hey Bo, great to have you here. I hope you enjoy the continuation of this ride. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by renaming this file into first exploration. And I will create another index.js file. And I am going to pretty much start from scratch because that was just for experimenting. Now I want to really try to write some abstractions. The first thing that I know I will need is access to the file system. So I guess I can refer to this for this couple of lines. And I don't think I'm going to use Lodash. Lodash was kind of convenient for that first exploration, but... Oh, you are doing audio editing while watching me. Fun. What are you editing? What are you working on? I worked on a song today. It is in my YouTube channel. I was playing around with the REAPER features that I wanted to cover in the stream with Aria, whenever Aria shows up. And yeah, I ended up making a song. I wasn't planning on that, but I had so much fun playing around with MIDI and all the features. I mean, did you know this? I learned this today, and it's how the exploration started and ended up in a song. Did you know that there is this thing called the inline MIDI editor? Did you know about this? I didn't know about this. It is so cool. It is like a small version of the MIDI editor. But if you're just doing quick editing, I mean, that is so convenient. I loved that feature. Oh, okay. You are working on a remix context. All right. So this is an example. It's a stress test. So maybe let's find an example of a plugin that we could develop, a quick, small plugin. Okay, wait, what? Can you show that again? Sure. It's when you have a MIDI item and you double click it, it opens in the MIDI editor, usually. But there is this right click and then open items in editor and then open items in, where is it? In inline editor. I just went over that. Open items in editor, open in inline editor. And then it just shows a simplified version of the full MIDI window. You can see the piano on the left, little piano roll over there, and you can move around like this. And it looks pretty cool. I kind of like it, especially when you have a couple tracks and then maybe you have some of these. And you can open the inline MIDI editor in all the MIDI items that you want. And you can see everything, like maybe this is a melody, this is some drums. And another cool thing is that the grid on the timeline is the grid inside this editor here. Yeah, you can edit the MIDI in the take item. Yeah, right here, I'm creating notes in here. And the grid is going to follow whatever is the timeline grid, which is a feature that if you dive into here, you can use the same grid division in Arrange View and the MIDI editor, so you can sort of do this already. But it's a setting that doesn't stick around, so either you enable this every time or you enable it on a project template, but you have to come back here every time. It's not going to remember that setting for you. But in here, it just makes a lot more sense to me. I mean, if I have some kind of, and all the keyboard shortcuts and mouse modifiers kind of work here as well. Like I can paint notes, suppose that I'm doing some drums. So let's go into one bar. And then I can quickly use my keyboard shortcuts to play around with the timeline from here. So maybe let's have a bunch of quarter notes, not quarter notes, eighth notes. And then some quarter notes. Something weird happened on my second display. But I said that I was going to do quarter notes. So here we are, quarter notes. So if you get the hang of the keyboard shortcuts to change the grid, which I guess is something that you have to do anyway, you can be fast with this. You can even fold to just show the notes that you are using. So if you have a scale that you already have going on, that works from here as well. And there are more features. Probably there is a Kenny Joya video about this, but yeah, I didn't know this existed. I was playing around with this today. Fun stuff. But that's not what we are here for today. So we're going to find an effect that we can do using this approach, and we can see what sorts of abstractions we can get. And maybe the volume would be a good one, just because it's so simple. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to do a volume effect again. It's going to be similar to the effect that we did a couple times in this channel already. And it's going to be as simple as allowing you to change the volume, right? But we'll see what sorts of abstractions we can get using the JSJSFX approach. So one thing that I think I want to do is, you know how in JSFX there are all these sections like the init block, and then the slider block, and then the serialize block, and then the block, and then the sample block, and then the GFX block. Did I forget one? I don't think I did. I think that these are all of them. Okay, there is this init, slider, block, sample, serialize, and GFX. I got it right. So you know how there are all these sections, and when you're writing code, depending on what you're doing, you have to touch all of these sections. For instance, suppose that I am doing something with the waveforms drawing. You have to initialize it here. This initialize is not a variable. It's something that I made up, like initialize. It's a snippet of code that I'm not showing. And then in the sample block, you have to accumulate sample into the waveform, something like that. And then in the GFX block, you have to draw the waveform. And most of this is code that I'm making up. But yeah, you know how all these sections have to do with drawing the waveform, and they are in different parts of the code base, which I guess makes sense because the code base is structured by when things are going to run, which is a very reasonable approach. We are talking about when a block of code is going to run. That makes a lot of sense. But I think that I prefer a different organization where I will have something that has to do with waveforms. And then I will do something like in the init block, I want a particular piece of code to run, like in my example, the initialize stuff. In the sample block, I will want this. And in the GFX block, I will want that. Now, the cool thing about this is that everything that has to do with waveforms is in a single place. And depending on the kind of work that you are doing, it makes more sense to reason about when the code is going to run. Depending on the kind of thing that you are doing, it makes more sense to group related features. And I think that both have advantages and disadvantages. In fact, I think that we should have some facilities for both. And in JSFX, you can only do this, which I guess has parallels to things like this is structured like if you are doing web programming, which I often tend to do. This is like your HTML. This is like your CSS. And this is like your JavaScript kind of thing, where you separate your code by different technologies, which sometimes makes sense. For instance, when you are defining a font. Doing that in a style sheet is great because you want the font to be the same everywhere on the website. Or if you have some sort of global state management in JavaScript, it's also a good thing to have as a separate thing. You have JavaScript, the technology that takes care of the behavior. HTML takes care of the content. CSS takes care of styles and presentation. That's a good separation of concerns, I guess. But in many cases, it makes more sense to think in terms of components. And I guess that's one of the reasons why React.js became so popular, because it brought to the table this approach of components and made it ergonomic and relatively easy to learn and to use. So these days, people used to use style sheets, but they also use components. They do both. When it makes sense to use a component, because it makes more sense to think of the thing in these terms than use a component. But there are other things that may make more sense at this level, at this other approach. I would also venture to say that this is more like object-oriented programming, and this is more like functional programming. That's kind of a stretch. So, all right, I think that I want some sort of facility to do this. And in my volume effect, I do want to draw the waveforms. So maybe drawing the waveforms will be the best case for me to reason about this and develop this abstraction that I'm talking about. This other strategy for thinking about how to organize the code. Right, so I guess the way that this is going to work is I am going to have this, I guess I'm going to have these components, borrowing the lingo from React. And then I'm going to push a new component. It's just going to be a list, right? I'm going to push into this component code that looks like this. And I will not worry too much about the actual code that goes in here. I will skip ahead to this, where I will do the actual volume thing. And I'm going to call it that because that's the name that I want to end up using. And things are in different directories, so it will not overwrite anything. And in fact, I'm not even running the thing that actually compiles this, so it's not a big deal. Right. So I'll start with having a description. And then in the end, when I'm done, I'm going to have other components, right? So this is, maybe it'll have like a name, but maybe not. It's not strictly necessary. So I'll have a bunch of these, one for waveforms, one for filtering samples, not in the volume effect, but in other effects. I will have something for filtering samples. I'll have something for drawing line graphs, for computing FFTs and that kind of thing. I'll have a bunch of components. Let's have at least two. And the other one is going to be a line graph. And then, yeah, it's all imaginary code anyway. So I have a bunch of components, and in the end, I will need to take this, which is slicing. I think of this as a matrix, right? Where lines are technologies or sections of your code, and columns are the components. So here I am factoring things by column, and I want to, I guess, invert this matrix and think of it in terms of transpose, not invert. I want to transpose the matrix and think of this in terms of lines. So that's what I'm going to do now. First of all, I may want to hard code the sections, but yeah, I'll just have something that is JSFX sections. And then in here, I'll have the description for my effect. I think I prefer to write the code like this. Then yeah, I think I'll run into trouble because of these spaces. So in here, I can go through the JSFX sections. And I can map over them. And the code that I want to produce is the name of the section, followed by a new line. And then I want to go over my components. And I'm going to flat map over the components. I'm going to explain this in a second. Yeah, okay, I'm going to explain this now. So you have a list, right? I'm going to call my list. In JavaScript, it's usually called an array. I'm going to call it an array. That's my array. Map is a function that takes each element in the array and applies a function to that. So I can do like, what is the element to the third power? So that's a map. Comes up with another list. And then I can typically join the elements on the list with some character, like a new line. Produces code that looks like that when I console log. Just putting new lines in there. And you'll see me doing that in a few places. That's great. But what else can we do instead of mapping? Well, we can do a flat map. And a flat map is something like this. You have to return a list and it's going to flatten the list. So if I return now maybe 2 elements, it's going to flatten the results. And now I have a list where I have the third power and then the square of each number as it goes in. But what's cool about this is that I can have conditions in here. So I can check if the element is less than the number 2, for instance, it's going to discard number 1 in there by returning an empty list. And otherwise, I will return a list with the element squared. So I am filtering the list and I am doing something to the list all in one pass, which is sort of neat. And is exactly what I want to do here. If my component does not specify some section, like they don't specify the slider section, then I want to output nothing. So I'll check if my component has that section. Well, if it doesn't have, then I will return an empty list. Otherwise, I will return just that. Okay, let's take a peek at what this is producing. Oh, okay. I'm not in the right directory. It should be under JSJSFX. Then my volume should be there. It is. Just like that. Oh, and this is joining with commas. I don't want to do that. I want to do a flat map and then join with new lines. So see, now I'm organizing the code on the source by components and on the target by sections, just like JSFX wants me to do. Now, there is a wrinkle here. I do always want to have something under the section because this is not valid JSFX. If the section is empty, JSFX is going to complain. So I guess what I can do is just put a no-op in here for it to be not empty, guaranteed to be not empty. This is particularly useful in the serialized block, where you want the serialized block to be there just to affect the presence of the number of channels in the init block, which is a weird quirk of JSFX. And this is already an abstraction that I sort of like. And I guess I want to extract this whole thing into a function to give some things more meaning. So yeah, I guess I'll call the function JSFX. It is going to need a name. And it's going to need some components. And I think that's it for now. So I'm just going to move this code into this function. And for now, I will hard code the name in here. So I guess I'm not going to call it name, I'm going to call it desk. Because that's what we see here. Or maybe I'll call it name. Yeah, we are creating abstractions, so we might as well, right? So name and components, and then I want to put the name in here as well. And then maybe this can be inlined. And okay, let's double check that first it is producing the same output, and it is. Next, it seems like we have enough new lines already, so I might just do that. And joining with a single space. Oh, this function needs to be asynchronous, and I will need to call it, right? And my name, I lost the name. async. Wait, what? Oh. Yeah, that's not the name of the plugin. Okay, try again. Now it worked. Yeah, I got rid of a bunch of spaces, all right. Okay, this is looking acceptable. So how about we introduce a facility for other annotations that you would need to include here? How about we even start with the sliders? That could be fun. So suppose that I will have a slider for gain, for instance, on this component. I want to have multiple sliders. And then what goes into a slider? A number, a name, and see, because I have this abstraction now, I am giving things proper names. When you just see this, it can be kind of like, what? But when you see this, it makes more sense. Now, the problem is also that I'm introducing abstractions. So people who use JSJSFX will need to learn this abstraction, which is a desirable thing in some contexts, but not in other contexts, because they still have to learn JSFX to read typical JSFX, and they also have to learn this abstraction on top. So it's a trade-off. We are exploring to see if this trade-off makes sense or not. By default, it will be 0, then the minimum, the maximum, and the step, and the description, and whether it's hidden or not, but I guess that's going to be optional. Okay. This isn't looking too bad, and so far we haven't really changed the code that we are producing. We're just adding more stuff to the component. But now we need to actually use this. So up here, I will have a section where I'm going to go over my components, and I'm going to map all of them. Or maybe even flat map. Maybe. I mean, flat map is all good, but we are talking about strings, so how about I just use map? And then if it's undefined, I return empty, and if it is defined, I return it. How does that work? Produces the same code. So it isn't too bad. Flat map is cool and stuff, but for working with strings, we might as well just do this. And then here on the slider section, I'll loop over my components, and for each component, I'm going to do something, and in the end, I'm going to join. So if my component sliders is undefined, then I will do something, otherwise I will do something else. You know what? There is a quicker way for me to write this, which is to just check. It is to return that, and if that doesn't exist, return an empty string. See, it's still producing the same code. Now here, if my sliders is undefined, then I return empty. Otherwise, I am going to map over them, and in the end I'm going to join, and my map is going to be a function that is going to produce a line, and I want all of these fields and then I will do a line that reads like, I'll not call this number, I'll call this the identifier. Yeah, that's fancy. Then is this a name? This is more like a variable, right? That's more like a name, but this is like a variable. Yeah, I'm gonna call this the variable. And I will add something in here, which is the hidden field, which doesn't exist here, but I can hide. I can probably create another slider that is hidden. And then I can check this over here. So I can say, if hidden is equal to true, then output a minus. And in this way, I'm sort of documenting all the weird behavior of JSFX, all the weird syntax of JSFX. I do have a weird syntax errors in here somewhere. It seems like the default keyword is reserved. Is that the case? I think it is reserved, especially in a ECMAScript module. I'll change this to initial. That's better. Identifier, variable, initial, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what comes out of this. Nothing. But the app crashed. I cannot read properties of undefined on this line. Well, it should not be undefined, should it? I just checked if it's undefined. Oh, okay. It's a typo. There you go. Here is a good slider. Well, I'm putting all of them in a line. That's no good. Let's join with a new line here. Now they are in different lines. And I can do some static analysis. Isn't that fun? I can check for the error that I had in here, right? Multiple sliders with the same number cannot be good. They need to have different numbers. So I will do some checking. For components of components, and for, well, slider identifiers, it is going to be a set, and for, well, if component dot sliders is not undefined, then I will loop over the slider and then if the set has that slider identifier, then I can throw a new error. Else, I should add that slider identifier. And I guess I can do it like this, which I guess is slightly better. Same here. Component.sliders is undefined. That is right. Now I'm getting a clean exit, and it shouldn't. Oh, no, the identifiers are different. And then I see repeated slider identifier 1. Cool stuff. I guess I'll put a comment here. Check for repeated slider identifiers. Output the JSFX. This is just a little bit of static analysis, just checking some trivial things. And let me come here to the chat and report that spammer real quick. All right, spammer has been reported. Okay, this isn't looking too bad. The little minus in there means that this will not show in the interface. I don't want too many spaces between the blocks. I'll not worry too much about the presentation of the output. As long as it is syntactically correct, I will just deal. So, how do we feel about this? This is beginning to show the kinds of abstractions that we can build on top of JSJSFX. We can have abstractions for sliders. We can have abstractions for all the different blocks. And on the one hand, I think that this is more structured. This is a nicer way of composing things. It's a nicer way of reasoning about things, but it is another layer to learn. I am not sure. Let's push further. Let's see what we can write. Let's maybe try to do the waveforms thing, but the right way, not using thousands of variables like yesterday. Though there is something else that I want to test. Coming back to the first exploration, let's get rid for a moment of, or maybe not, because it doesn't really matter. It's just going to produce the same code again. But let's test. We stress tested with 200 waveforms, each having 10,000 variables and whatnot. This is not realistic. We would probably have, like, let's say 64. okay? 64 of these waveforms, because we have 64 channels in our track. 64 is, I guess, a good realistic stress test. And having 10,000 slices makes sense. So in a more realistic setting where we'll not produce millions, literally millions of lines of code, do you think that this approach is going to be better? Having thousands of variables in a file is going to be better? Maybe. Let's see. So I have to change this. I also have to dive into the waveforms like that and have 64 of them there. So now this is a closer comparison. Then I can run real quick my first exploration again. It's a good thing that we kept that around. Let's look at the code that we produced. Still kind of slow to load. And it is 2 million lines of code. Yeah, this is gonna blow up. Right, let's load things into Reaper, and my audio is gonna get weird and everything because I'm going to start stress testing Reaper again. I'm going to start with the objects version. It shouldn't break a sweat. Yeah, it's 2% CPU. I bet that my voice is not even affected by this. 2% CPU is completely fine. Then let's try that. We got the beach ball. Yeah, okay. Not even in a realistic setting, doing a sliding window that way makes sense. At least my voice doesn't seem to be bad right now. At least on the meters, my voice looks okay. But Reaper crashed, or is going to crash. No, it didn't crash. But it is going to be slow. Yeah, let me remove that effect. That's a time bomb. Okay, so yeah, not even in a realistic setting that makes sense. Just wanted to check. So now let's use memory. In the init block, we'll need to initialize some memory. And the waveform is going to start at 0. Maybe I need some facility to allocate memory, right? I could start writing some abstraction for memory allocation. Yeah, let's do that. Next available address is equal to 0. No, I cannot do it here because in many cases I will need to do that. The chunk of memory that I want to allocate is dependent on the number of channels, for instance. So this abstraction cannot live in the JavaScript. It has to live in here. So I guess this is a place where it makes more sense for me to have some runtime code that is in JSFX, some auxiliary runtime code. Let's see. If my JSFX section is equal to init, or maybe I could have a component that does this. Yeah, right. Let's do that. Let's take care of that. Is this still running? It isn't. Yeah, okay, so this is the kind of code that I'm talking about, and I want some auxiliary function to help me with memory allocation. So I am going to add a component to the beginning of the components array. This is going to be our runtime. And the component is going to have an init block. And in the init block, I will have a function that I will call allocate, given a size. And I guess I'm going to namespace this with underscores. And then I can return this. So now in the init block, we should be seeing that. We are not. Oh, hey there, I put this in the wrong place. This is my treatment of sliders. This is where I want to put that. And now I have a memory allocator in the produced code, in the runtime. And check this out. Aria is back. Hello, Aria. Great to have you here. Oh, and I have another spammer as well. Hello, spammer. It's great to have you here. And isn't that the same spammer I just reported? Come on. Get out of here. Just got home from dentist with a dead phone. But I hope your teeth is all right. Not too late to apologize. Of course not. It's all right. Or if you want to continue this and have our thing tomorrow, that works too. Yeah, in fact, I think I'm about to wrap up, so we can do this tomorrow. Tomorrow, we are going to talk about something else that is not going to be this piece of code. And don't worry about it, Aria. It's fine. I'm glad that you are back and that you are well. At least I hope that you are well. So yeah, tomorrow we will talk about something. And yeah, okay, so that's the schedule. I'm going to wrap up now. Tomorrow, Aria and I... Oh, your feed is not... Oh, okay, sorry. So here's what's up. Tomorrow, Aria and I are going to stream together. We are going to talk about something. In fact, usual time, yes. And in fact, I'm going to wrap up now so that Aria and I can have a quick chat to talk about what we are going to do the stream about. And then on Friday, I'll get back to this and we'll explore a little further to see if this JSFX approach, if this JSJSFX approach is going to fly or not. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to wrap up now. And Aria, I will call you in a moment so that we can have a quick chat, or maybe we can write, but we'll decide what we are going to do tomorrow. So yeah, thanks all for being here. Thanks for being active on the chat, for supporting me in all the different ways that you do. And I see you tomorrow with Aria and we'll talk about REAPER some more. All right. Enjoy. Bye.